What future has Rome if we bow to the ambitious and the cruel? Shall we be ruled by the sword or by the law? I say by neither man's threat nor his...
Let it be done.
As you will, Senator.
The sun was sinking over Rome when Marcus Tullius Cicero finally realized the Republic he'd spent his life defending was already dead. And soon, so was he. His words had once moved armies, brought down consuls, and inspired generations. But words can wound, and for Mark Antony, Cicero's words had carved too deep. Now, the orator who had torn Antony's reputation apart was about to be torn apart himself, not just in body, but in spirit. The story of Cicero's death isn't just an execution. It's the slow, methodical destruction of a man. A ritual humiliation staged for all of Rome to see. It began months earlier, after the Ides of March, 44 BC. Julius Caesar lay dead, his blood soaking the marble of Pompey's theater. Rome's republic had been saved, the assassins claimed. But freedom, once lost, never returns cleanly. And in the vacuum left behind, two men rose, each seeing himself as Rome's savior and the other as its curse. Cicero, the philosopher, the voice of reason. Mark Antony, the soldier, the man of the sword. They were opposites, intellect versus instinct, law versus power. And soon, admiration turned to hatred. At first, Antony tried to keep peace. But Cicero saw through him, saw the shadow of Caesar in his ambition, the hunger in his eyes. And when Cicero decided to strike, he didn't need an army. He had something far sharper, his tongue. From the Senate steps, he unleashed the Philippics, 14 speeches crafted not just to criticize Antony, but to annihilate him. Each word was poison, dipped in irony and contempt. Cicero called him a drunk, a whoremonger, a brute in armor pretending to be a statesman. He mocked Antony's debts, his failures, even his wife. Antony is a disease, Cicero declared, and Rome must cut him out. Those words burned through the city like wildfire. They spread in pamphlets, whispered in taverns, carved into graffiti. Antony's soldiers spat when they heard Cicero's name. The Senate began to shift. The people began to doubt, and Antony, humiliated, exiled, and mocked, began to boil. For Antony, this wasn't politics anymore. This was personal. He imagined Cicero's face every night, calm, arrogant, unafraid. He heard that smooth voice, even in his dreams, still lecturing him about virtue and justice. And so his hatred fermented, black and patient. Months passed. Rome fractured again. Assassins fled, generals turned, and a new player entered the board. Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. Young, clever, dangerous. Cicero saw him as a weapon, a puppet he could use to destroy Antony once and for all. But he was wrong. Octavian wasn't a boy to be used. He was a mirror of Caesar, smiling, patient, deadly. By 43 BC, alliances had shattered. Armies shifted like sand, and on a cold November day, on a small island in the river Lavinius, 3 men met in secret. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. They sealed the second triumvirate, an unholy trinity of vengeance. Their first act, to cleanse Rome with blood. They revived the proscriptions, death lists of enemies to be executed without trial. Names of senators, generals, and nobles were scribbled down like debts to be paid in flesh. Antony offered up his uncle. Lepidus gave up his brother. And when Octavian hesitated at one name, Cicero's, Antony smiled and said, "No peace until that tongue is silenced." Cicero's name was written first, in thick black ink. When Cicero learned he was marked for death, he didn't run immediately. He sat in silence, staring at the horizon from his villa in Tusculum. He had spent his life trying to save Rome from tyranny, and now tyranny wore the face of Rome itself. He tried to flee, toward the coast, toward Macedonia, toward some illusion of safety. But everywhere he turned, the Republic's ghosts followed. His brother was killed. His allies vanished. Even the sea rejected him. Storms drove his ship back to shore. Plutarch writes that he sat on the sand for hours, exhausted, his face pale as marble. "There is nothing proper in what they do," he murmured, "but I will die in the country I have saved." When the assassins found him, Cicero didn't scream. He didn't beg. He ordered his servants to set down his litter, brushed the dust from his cloak, and lifted his head high. "Do what you must," he said softly, "but do it well." The centurion nodded, but his hand trembled. It took 3 strikes to sever the orator's head. But Antony's orders didn't end there. The soldiers were told to take his hands too. The hands that had written the Philippics, that had humiliated Antony in front of all Rome. Blood soaked the sand. The air stank of iron and salt. The killers wrapped the grisly trophies in cloth and set out for Rome. When they arrived, Antony was waiting in the forum. He didn't flinch when he saw them. The head, grey with death, the hands stiff and cold. Instead, he laughed. He ordered a purse of gold to be given to the men. Then, with the eyes of Rome upon him, he gave one last command. "Display them," he said, where he once spoke. The crowd watched in horror as the soldiers hammered Cicero's head and hands onto the Rostra, the speaker's platform from which he had once defended the Republic. Every blow of the hammer echoed through the forum. Each nail was a statement. The voice of liberty silenced, the hands of reason destroyed. The blood dripped down the marble steps. Slow, steady, almost rhythmic. Children cried. Old senators turned away. But Antony stood still, eyes glinting. The revenge was complete, or so he thought. Then came Fulvia, Antony's wife, sharp, tongued and vengeful. Cicero had mocked her too in life, calling her the general's mistress. Now, with his head mounted on the platform, Fulvia stepped forward. She spat on it. Then, in front of the crowd, she pulled the hairpins from her curls, long bronze, sharp, and drove them into Cicero's dead tongue again and again. Blood trickled down her fingers. The crowd gasped. It wasn't enough for Antony to kill his enemy. He needed to erase him, to humiliate the very voice that had once called him a tyrant. In that moment, Rome understood something terrible. This wasn't justice. This was transformation. The Republic turning into empire, philosophy turning into fear. Cicero's death was not the end of a man. It was the end of an idea. The Rostra, once a place of words, became a place of silence. The message was clear. Speak too loudly and you'll join him. But time, cruel and ironic, has a way of avenging the dead. Antony's revenge was perfect, for a moment. Yet history remembers not the man who ordered the mutilation, but the man who endured it. The sword silenced Cicero's voice, but his words survived. They outlived Antony, Fulvia, and the triumvirs. They outlived the Republic itself. For centuries after, scholars, kings, and revolutionaries would study Cicero's speeches, the very ones Antony had tried to erase, and learn what Rome forgot, that tyranny can kill the man, but never the idea. And so, on that blood-soaked morning, Antony may have won his revenge. But Cicero, the old broken philosopher, won immortality. Because even nailed to the Rostra, even mutilated and mocked, his silence still spoke louder than Antony's roar.